The frozen night air of Petrograd, December 1916, hung heavy with untold secrets and the chilling breath of impending doom. For months, a desperate, shadowy conspiracy had meticulously brewed within the opulent, gilded palaces of Russia, driven by a desperate few determined to save their crumbling empire from the grasp of a man they unequivocally branded as pure evil. They plotted his death with a meticulous, almost surgical precision. Poison that should have killed an entire army, multiple gunshots that tore brutally through his flesh, and finally the icy, unforgiving embrace of a frozen river. Yet when the battered body was eventually pulled from the Neva's frigid depths days later, it held a chilling, utterly impossible truth. This was Grigori Rasputin, the enigmatic Siberian mystic, the notorious mad monk who held the powerful Romanovs completely in his thrall. And his death was not swift. It was a brutal, agonizing defiance of all human limits, a final, horrifying performance that would forever cement his legend as the man who simply refused to die. This is the terrifying story of how a kingdom's desperation led to a conspiracy of unparalleled brutality, culminating in the excruciating, agonizing final hours of one of history's most enigmatic and resilient figures. Rasputin's improbable and controversial journey to the very heart of imperial power began not in St. Petersburg's sophisticated, opulent salons, but in the harsh, desolate plains of Siberia, far from the trappings of power. Born Grigori Yefimovich Novik around 1869 in a humble peasant village, his early life was starkly marked by crushing poverty, illiteracy, and a rough, unrefined demeanor. Yet even in his youth, he began to cultivate a strange, unsettling reputation as a mystic, a spiritual healer, and a visionary. He possessed an unsettling charisma, an almost hypnotic gaze from eyes that seemed to penetrate the very soul, and a raw, earthy magnetism that drew people to him. He cultivated an image as a genuine holy man, a stranic or wandering pilgrim who could discern spiritual truths and divine will beyond mortal understanding. Word of his supposed profound spiritual powers and miraculous cures spread slowly but steadily through the vast Russian countryside, eventually drawing a devoted, almost cult-like following. This growing fame inevitably garnered the desperate attention of those in the highest echelons of Russian society, individuals increasingly desperate for any form of solace, spiritual guidance, or divine intervention in a world growing ever more uncertain. His eventual arrival in St. Petersburg, a quiet affair at first, soon exploded into widespread controversy and scandal. Rasputin quickly gained entry into the exclusive, deeply superstitious, and somewhat insular Romanov court. Thanks largely to his initial connections with high-ranking church figures and a circle of influential society women drawn to his unconventional piety and raw spiritual energy. His swift and utterly controversial rise to unparalleled influence over Tsarina Alexandra would prove profoundly catastrophic for the already fragile dynasty. The absolute key to his mesmerizing power lay in his uncanny, almost miraculous, perceived ability to alleviate the intense suffering of Tsarevich Alexei, the young, desperately awaited heir to the Russian throne, who was afflicted with hemophilia, a debilitating and often fatal bleeding disorder. When Alexei suffered a terrifying bleeding episode, seemingly only Rasputin's calming presence and whispered prayers could miraculously calm the boy and halt the bleeding, baffling and terrifying the royal physicians who were powerless to help. This astonishing, repeated success gave Rasputin an unbreakable, almost mystical hold over the desperate Tsarina, who in her profound grief and fear for her son, genuinely believed him to be a direct messenger from God, the only one capable of saving her beloved Alexei, and by extension, the very future of the Romanov dynasty. This unyielding, almost blind devotion, however, fueled a torrent of increasingly venomous scandals and fierce opposition from within the rigid court and across all layers of Russian society. They saw him not as a holy man, but as a manipulative charlatan, a depraved drunkard, and a dangerous, corrupting influence on the empress, whose judgment was increasingly questioned amidst the growing social and political turmoil of a nation teetering on the brink of revolution. Rasputin's ever-growing influence, however, came at a terrible cost to the Romanov dynasty's reputation and the stability of Russia itself. The nobility, deeply conservative and fiercely protective of imperial honor, watched with increasing horror and seething hatred as Rasputin's scandalous behavior, his drunken escapades, his debaucherous affairs, and his overt manipulation of the empress eroded public trust in the monarchy. They viewed him not as a holy man, but as a corrupting, cancerous force, a dangerous charlatan whose very presence threatened to bring down the entire empire, especially amidst the brutal turmoil of World War I. Whispers of treason and madness filled the gilded halls of Petrograd. A grim consensus emerged among a desperate few. Rasputin had to be eliminated. This desperate resolve solidified into a cold, calculated plot to save Russia. The key conspirators were an unlikely, yet determined group of aristocrats and patriots. Most notably, Prince Felix Yusupov, one of Russia's wealthiest and most enigmatic young men, whose lavish palace would become the scene of the horrific deed. Alongside him stood Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, a cousin of the Tsar himself, lending the conspiracy a chilling royal legitimacy. Other co-conspirators included Vladimir Purishkevich, a right-wing Duma member, and a few military officers. Their shared goal was singular and absolute. Rasputin had to die. They believed his removal was the only way to restore the monarchy's honor and prevent a looming revolution that threatened to engulf their world. The meticulous planning of the assassination was a labyrinth of deceit, a meticulously crafted trap designed to ensure Rasputin's demise without a trace of official involvement. Prince Yusupov, feigning a desire for Rasputin's spiritual guidance, lured him to his lavish Moika palace on the evening of December 29, 1916. Yusupov had carefully prepared a private dining room in the palace's cellar, away from prying eyes, adorned with opulent furnishings but concealing a sinister purpose. Here, the true horror lay in the seemingly innocuous feast laid out before him. Delectable cakes and glasses of sweet Madeira wine, all meticulously laced with enough cyanide to kill several men instantly. The conspirators, hidden upstairs in a tense vigil, waited with bated breath, convinced that this silent, swift poison would be the end of the mad monk, an end they believed utterly essential for the future of their beloved Russia. They had no idea that Rasputin's legendary, almost mythical invincibility was about to undergo its most terrifying and agonizing test. What followed defied all logic and plunged the night into sheer horror. After hours of agonizing waiting, Prince Yusupov finally descended to the cellar. Rasputin, despite having consumed cyanide-laced cakes and wine in quantities large enough to kill several men, showed absolutely no signs of distress. He sat there talking calmly, even humming a tune, completely unaffected. Yusupov's heart pounded with a mix of terror and disbelief. The deadly poison, meticulously prepared for guaranteed lethality, had utterly failed. Rasputin was unnervingly resilient, seemingly immune to a substance that should have killed him instantly. A cold dread gripped Yusupov. Was this truly the devil they faced, a being beyond mortal harm? This chilling resistance, this inexplicable defiance of a potent killer, spoke volumes of Rasputin's legendary, almost supernatural resilience, filling the conspirators with a desperate mounting panic. Panic seized Yusupov entirely. He rushed upstairs, frantic, to inform his co-conspirators, whose faces blanched with shock and renewed fear. The Grand Duke Dmitry, utterly beside himself with disbelief, exclaimed, "Felix, the poison isn't working. He's still alive." Faced with the monstrous failure of their plan, they concluded that the only way to ensure Rasputin's demise was a more direct, brutally violent method. With a desperate, grim resolve, Prince Yusupov returned to the cellar, this time armed with a revolver. As Rasputin turned to admire a crucifix, Yusupov, mustering every ounce of his courage, fired a single shot into Rasputin's back. The monk let out a guttural roar, then collapsed, seemingly lifeless. A wave of immense, profound relief washed over the conspirators. They believed the nightmare was finally, definitively over. Rasputin was dead, or so they desperately thought. But the night held more horrors than they could ever imagine. An hour later, as Yusupov, still reeling from the failed poisoning, returned to the cellar to ensure Rasputin was indeed dead, a terrifying, impossible event occurred. Rasputin, who had lain utterly motionless, seemingly lifeless, suddenly, violently, sprang back to life. his eyes wide and maniacal, fixed upon Yusupov with a chilling, predatory gaze. With a guttural, inhuman roar, he lunged, his powerful, reanimated hands gripping Yusupov's throat. The prince screamed in pure terror, breaking free as Rasputin, seemingly reanimated from the dead, staggered out of the cellar and into the snowy palace courtyard, attempting to escape into the frigid Petrograd night. This horrifying revival, this creature defying death itself, sent shockwaves of pure, unadulterated terror through the already desperate conspirators, confirming their worst fears. He was not a man, but a demon. The conspirators, now utterly consumed by a desperate fury and primal blinding fear, renewed their brutal efforts to kill the seemingly indestructible monk. Vladimir Purishkevich, the Duma member, pursued Rasputin into the courtyard, firing multiple shots into his back. Rasputin stumbled, but with an almost supernatural will, still tried to crawl away. The conspirators then descended upon him in a frenzied mob, beating him mercilessly with heavy clubs and fists, delivering blow after blow to his head and body until he was once again motionless, his form mangled. To ensure his complete and utter demise, to finally break the unbreakable, they bound his body tightly with heavy ropes, weighed him down with chains, and dragged his battered form to a nearby bridge spanning the Neva River. With one final desperate push, they heaved his broken, lifeless body into the frigid, icy waters of the Neva River below. They believed the icy depths would finally claim the life that poison, bullets, and brutal beatings could not. This was the brutal, desperate, and ultimately exhausting culmination of their conspiracy, driven by a sheer inability to kill a man who simply refused to die. The conspirators, mentally and physically exhausted and horrified by their night's ordeal, retreated from the Neva's edge, convinced they had finally ended the Mad Monk's life. But Rasputin's final act of defiance, his most chilling miracle, was yet to be fully revealed. Days later, his body was discovered downstream, pulled from the icy depths. What the subsequent autopsy revealed was utterly chilling and added a final, unbelievable layer to the legend of his resilience. The forensic examination, conducted with painstaking detail by the medical authorities, confirmed that the initial massive dose of poison had had no discernible effect whatsoever. The massive dose of cyanide had completely failed to kill him. Furthermore, while he had suffered multiple gunshot wounds, it was determined that these shots, though severe, were not immediately fatal or the direct cause of death. Instead, the autopsy concluded with grim certainty that Grigori Rasputin, the man who had defied poison and bullets and beatings, had ultimately died by drowning. His lungs were horrifically filled with water, suggesting he was still alive when he entered the frigid river, struggling desperately for air against the overwhelming cold. This shocking discovery only deepened the mystery surrounding his near invincibility, cementing his image as a man who simply refused to succumb to death, adding a terrifying, almost supernatural allure to his legend. The immediate aftermath of Rasputin's death plunged Russia into further chaos, inadvertently hastening the very revolution the conspirators had desperately hoped to prevent. The Romanov family, particularly the grief-stricken Tsarina Alexandra, was devastated by his demise. The conspirators, initially hailed as heroes by some factions of the nobility, faced mixed fates. Prince Yusupov and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich were exiled, while others faced lesser consequences. Their drastic action, however, utterly failed to stabilize the monarchy. Instead, removing the one figure who seemed capable of calming the Tsarina, however controversially, only left her more isolated, distraught, and deeply distrusted by the public, further weakening the Tsar's already precarious grip on power amidst the brutal turmoil of World War I. Rasputin's enduring myth grew even larger in his death, transforming him into a potent, almost mystical symbol of Russia's dramatic decline and the bizarre, almost mystical forces believed to be at play in its destiny. His haunting influence, even from beyond the grave, seemed to loom over the final, doomed years of the Romanov dynasty. Rasputin's story, a tale of raw power, profound desperation, and an almost supernatural defiance of death, continues to captivate and mystify historians and audiences alike. He remains a timeless mystery, A figure whose extraordinary life and agonizing death defy easy explanation, reminding us of the thin, precarious veil between genuine faith and dangerous fanaticism, profound influence and cunning manipulation, and the enduring human capacity for both profound belief and unspeakable brutality. His survival through poison and multiple gunshots, only to ultimately drown in an icy river, forever marks him as the man who refused to die, a chilling testament to incredible physical resilience, or perhaps indeed a dark, enduring curse on those who dared to cross his path. If this chilling, in-depth tale of Rasputin's horrifying life and agonizing final hours left you unsettled and eager for more historical revelations, please do hit that like button. Share this video with someone who appreciates the darker, more profound truths of the past. And don't forget to subscribe to Tales of Tortures and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey into history's most compelling, terrifying, and illuminating stories. Stay tuned.